thanks for being here. Thanks for following, guys. Like all the 4 classes so far, it's like a lot and it's a lot of time. So that's super awesome. So thank you, and I hope you're enjoying it. Today we're obviously gonna try to finish this thing, and we're gonna work on our little flowers and our little leaves. So these are the little benchmark cards that I did for them. I always set them aside. I do like to work from, I think I've already said this, but I do like to work from my little benchmarks because especially I'm trying to be less photorealistic and just like, I don't like necessarily copying photos. So this is my one way to filter myself. So even if you like copy a photo for your reference to begin with, if you're then copying your paintings, you're like a little bit less, it's a little bit less risky to just like copy the photo. So it kind of helps you, I find for me, it helps me like develop a style a little bit more. So that's why I always do these little cards. So yeah, we're actually just gonna start doing washes today. So I've got my favorite brush. I did pick up these really cool brushes if you guys are looking for these. They're just called like Zen Royal Land Nickel, I guess. They were like $4 at Omer Dessert, which is our art store, but I'm actually really enjoying them. So I might use this one today just because I get a lot of water in it. And then I just got like a few different sizes of them. So yeah, I am enjoying those brushes. I did find them this week, so I just thought I would let you guys know.
That's the same brand I have.
Is it? They're pretty good. I'm liking them. And I also picked up another thing that I was testing out this week. This stuff, the Fabriano paper, dirt cheap. Also, I was surprised at the price. And I did this on it today, and I was just like super happy with the paper. It like kind of buckled a little bit, but I didn't even put it under anything, and it's flat.
Wow.
So this is, and it's 25% cotton, but I find it does lift well. So I think I like it better now, I think, than my Coatman really bad student paper, but I actually think I like it better than my Arches also. So that's another find that I found that I liked. So in terms of the flower, I was keeping it kind of light because I do want the fish to be really punchy. We do have to balance a little bit with all the background in terms of intensity. And I didn't want to go too pink, but I also didn't want to go too orange. So I kind of like I basically just used, in this case, my alizarin crimson. And then I created some purples with my cerulean blue and my alizarin crimson to bring sort of like a blue tint to the shadows. And then the center point was just, I think it's just like, if I remember correctly, it's just a bit of my Naples yellow and I think some of my cadmium yellow and just a really light wash. So we can actually, if you want to, we can start with the yellow just because it's actually really easy and kind of a no-brainer. So I'm just gonna mix up a little bit of those colors and just put it into the center. I have quite a bit of water here. And I actually just kind of want it to be really light. These flowers are sort of white flowers. So I didn't want to go overboard with the color on them. And I've gone like way too intense with this right now, but I'm just gonna let it sort of soak into the paper for a second and not panic. And then I'm just gonna dab it off with my paper. I'm gonna let it sit first. I always go too soon and then I have no paint left. A little bit more. Because I feel like once I have that sort of area out of the way, because that's where most of the detail is, then I just kind of worry less about it, painting around it. I know not to put any blue or pink there. All right. And then, so for my shadows, I'm actually just gonna grab a little bit more. My palettes are getting, I do normally work with a messy palette, like I said, but I wanna keep clean colors for you guys just so you can see the proper mixing, so. Just a little bit more of my cerulean blue. And then I love the purple that it makes with my alizarin crimson. And so this was sort of the color that I used in the shadow. I like to go blue into my shadows, generally speaking, just because it's sort of natural for how the environment works. And again, I'm just sort of staying really, really light with this. I don't want too much. And if you want to sort of dull this out a little bit, you could bring in a tiny bit of that cadmium red just to make it a little bit more gray. I don't want it too saturated. So now I've got sort of like a saturated, desaturated blue purple. And I'm just gonna go into, so on my little flower here, I sort of did everything that's underneath. I did a shadow, so going into the petals. And then actually, if we decided before that the light is coming this way, we can kind of, where the petals curves, like I'm imagining that they curve like this shape. So if the sun's coming this way, it's going to create a shadow on that side. So that was kind of the logic that I did. I imagined the light coming from this side. So I darkened everything that would be like, would have a cast shadow on it on the other side. So anything that's into the center, and anything that's like sort of hidden by where the light might hit. I do want to, like in situations like this, I might actually remove a bit. I'm gonna fake the light a little bit because I want to maintain the silhouette and a clear shape of that petal. So I'm just gonna sort of fake. I always want to kind of try to design with dark against light, just so that I can like maintain my silhouettes. Another trick that I used, and I didn't use it on this painting, but I do like to use it in general, is using actually just like cross hatching and my pencil under my paint in order to create my shadows. I find the gray color of the pencil lead to be actually a really nice color, especially with white objects for your shadows. So I'm just trying to like bring out the volume of this little flower with the shadow color. And a bit anywhere into the center. And clean that up later. And then down into here. You can always go back and darken in later. I'm gonna stay kind of light for now. But they're delicate, so I don't think we need them to be too intense, like too dark. So already we should sort of start seeing the volume happening. And I'm gonna go do the other one because we're gonna need to wait for this to dry anyways before we put the red on top. So I'm actually just gonna go in and paint my other little petals on this side. I don't know what that was.
That was me getting an email.
Oh, okay. I thought it was maybe someone trying to get in. That's fine then, as long as no one's locked out. I know there's like a lot of people following just the video, so it's so late for everyone out east. That was the downside of me moving out here. Everyone else lives out east. Vancouver's on a weird time zone. Eventually, I think my partner's gonna go back to work in an office. So I'm gonna try to organize some little classes at like 3 p.m. my time instead, so that everyone who's out east can sort of hook up on a reasonable time schedule. All right, once you've got the blue in, now that this one's done and this one's probably pretty dry, I'm actually just gonna take a little bit of alizarin. I've got some cadmium red and some blues here. I'm just gonna kind of mix up something with that. I don't love to take things straight out of the tubes usually, just because I just find it a bit uninteresting. So I'll usually just kind of mix things up a little bit on my palette. And then I just go over with, I just go over what I did, and the tips, because like the flowers are white, I actually just did leave a little bit of white. So I did like my shadow color and then a little bit of the red, and then on the sort of the tips of the flowers where the light would be strongest, I just left it white. So you can kind of just leave some white on the, wherever the light would be like hitting. Whoops, that's way too much. I want it to be a bit soft, so not too much pigment. I tend to dab it. If I just find it's too much, I just dab it off. I kind of like the texture that it gives anyways. Sort of adds a randomness to the way the watercolor sits that I find kind of nice. So normally I would take a little bit more time with this. I know I say that every class, but I feel like if I don't say it, we're just going to be giving our work a little bit of injustice. I think rushing through paintings is not necessarily the best way to go about it. However, when we have an hour together, it's like kind of a necessity. So feel free to just sort of take your time. You don't have to finish this with me tonight. You can go back into it and do a better job than I'm going to be doing. All right, and then when that one's done, obviously, I'm going to move on to the next one because it should be pretty much dry now. For the one near the fish, I think I'm going to sort of make sure that the edges are really clean on this flower here and that I have enough of that pink pigment just to make sure that we see a good delineation between where that flower is and where the fish is. just so there's like enough color contrast in there. We're gonna go over it with lines anyways too, which is gonna help, but I think the color should help that read a little bit. And then if there's any parts that I don't like on my petals, I'll usually just go back with a wet brush with just water and just kind of clean up some of these edges. Like there's some spots where I kind of want more white showing on the sides toward the light. So I'm just gonna go in and kind of soften out some of those strokes and fix up some of those spots. All right. And then it doesn't quite have the punch that we need yet, but the color is all there. Because the leaves are dry, I'm now going to go on to my leaves. And what I like to do with these, so I've got my little benchmarks here. So I was using pretty thin pen. I think it might be, yeah, I think it's the 5, just because the watercolor paper has a bit of tooth on it. And again, I'm using the Canson XL, and the tooth is actually quite fine. And it's part of the reason I chose this paper was because I knew I was going to be doing this sort of mixed media stuff. And it's just kind of softer on your pens in the long run if there's not like a crazy tooth. But you could use a 3 or a 5 on the micron. This one's a bit smaller, so I'm going to go for the 3 than my template one. And then I basically just like outlined or went on the inside and just kind of followed some of those like vein lines that we made, but I also added a few others. And then in any spot where I had little like bumps and divots that we did with the ink when we were kind of like random with the ink, I kind of did little V marks to make it look like the leaf is sort of folding in on itself in those places. So that was kind of the logic that I was using, sort of following some of the veins to highlight some of the negative space ones. I left some negative space without any, so I just kind of randomized it. And then tried to make it look like there was some volume in those little dips. And I stuck my paper down. So normally I would turn my paper, but you won't see properly. So I'm just gonna struggle through this. But yeah, it's basically just as simple now as coming in and you want to try to come out like on the angle. This is way easier. Please turn your paper if you're finding this a struggle, but I'm wanting to keep it in a sort of straight lines radiating out from that center. So maybe like one in here. And this is part of the reason why I did these softer watercolor ones first. It's sort of a guide to help us, because if we're going in with black to do this and we don't have any reference point, it can be hard to sort of see the direction that you have to go. Whereas with these sort of softer watercolor lines in here first, it kind of gives us like a guide. And on the underneath part, I wanted to follow the shape of that curve. So because we want to give the feeling that it's curving up. So when I do these lines, I'm trying to follow that upward motion. You don't need too many. You can basically adjust it. This is way easier if you turn your paper. All right, and then I basically just do the same thing for everyone else. But I think what I'll do is I'll just skip to the flowers now because I know you guys, at least with this one example, I know you guys are capable of doing that. So we'll come back to them, but I want to get to the flowers. I'm just gonna bring my little benchmark here so if you can see it. So we have all these little like inside areas and then the leaf or the petals are like finely outlined. So for these, I just basically, actually let's do the petals first. I'm almost tempted to take a smaller, I think I'm gonna take my 2 pen, my O2. It's a little bit finer because these are even a little bit more delicate than the lily pads. And then I just go over my pencil mark that I made for those petals. So we're completely hiding our pencil marks essentially, which is why I didn't mind so much that they stayed visible on this one. Again, probably turning your paper is going to give you a better result. I've noticed that there's sort of a natural way that my hand likes to move. And whenever doing arcs, you can use either your wrist as a pivot point or your elbow. So that with turning your paper can give you some really nice clean arcs. And then for these little center points, I'm just gonna finish this for a sec. So we have this outlined. For these little center points, I'm just kind of going around them and then putting a little line into the middle to sort of show a direction that they're curving in. So if I decide that, like, let me see, we might have to add a few more. I didn't add them all in my drawing, but they're kind of all curving in towards the middle. So I might bring one in this way over here and then curve it. I'm trying to keep all of my lines a little bit rounded in shape instead of going too pointy because everything on the fish are rounded. So I'm trying to keep in that same sort of visual language as the fish. So if you have a point, like I kind of messed up here, but if you have a point, try to round it out instead of making it pointy. You can vary the size of these too, where they're kind of bigger toward the outside, and then they get smaller as they go toward the center. And then I just continue going over the rest of the petals. All right, and then from here, so I'm gonna leave for now the last little flower, but after this, I'm gonna show you some other little things that I used on the original, just to add some extra texture. And that's partly the little gold paint, or the metallic paints rather, and also like gel pens. This is the most rushed I've done outlining in my life. Rushing with this stuff doesn't necessarily yield the best results, but you get the idea. It's better, especially when it's lines like this, to actually just take your time a little bit more. So then I would just do like, I would repeat all of those steps for all of these other lily pads, and the flower, the other flower. And then to do a little bit of extra fun stuff, if you guys have these at home, I have this little kit of metallics. You might have other ones, but because this is orange, I just like took some of this like reddish one. It's like a bronze, and then I went into I just went like stippling into the shadow area. Oops, I need a little bit more. This stuff, it kind of becomes opaque at some point, but it's kind of, you have to kind of work it. So just with a fine brush, get a little bit more water on there. Let this soak a little. I'm gonna actually add some water to the other colors so that they're ready to go when I need them. These can take a little while. There we go. Now it's moving. All right. So I just kind of stippled. Oh, I did also already remove my masking fluid earlier before I started doing this. So you can kind of already see all the extra little the little dots and things and the lines that I have in there. This is just going to help to add a little bit of extra texture into some of those darker areas, and it's kind of fun with the metallics. The other thing that I do, actually, I forgot to mention, so I don't always necessarily leave all of these lines this white. Like in these shadow areas, I might come in now with like a little bit of that purpley blue color and just kind of do a wash, but really lightly. So it'll kind of soften the under parts. So I still have the sort of illusion that the lines are there, but it's no longer pure white. So sometimes after I remove my masking fluid, I will go in and just very delicately paint over some of those white areas. And you don't want to touch it too much because you don't want to disturb them. You just kind of want to like very lightly, not too much water, not too much pigment, but just wash into those areas. It helps to bring out the shadows and sort of the 3D feeling. Maybe on the bottom here. I might even grab a little bit more of that green blue here for under there. It just kind of gives a little bit more depth and volume to that fish. And then I went in also with my gold, but this one, because it's a little bit brighter, I went into sort of closer to where I put the yellows. And I'm literally just stippling it in. So it's kind of thick even, but it's just like little dabs. I didn't want it to be too powerful. I just wanted to give like little flecks wherever I put the orange, sort of around the head. You could even do some on some of these more prominent center, wherever the light hits is sort of where I'm thinking. So on these sort of prominent center ones. Fish are kind of sparkly, so that's why I wanted to do this. but I go like really soft with it. I'm not trying to overpower the painting. And then the white one I took and I just sort of went over into some areas on the head. This will come out a little bit gray, so you don't want to put it where your white highlights are. But it does kind of give that sort of shimmery fish look. And maybe into some of the whites down here. And I'm actually just going to draw along the edge of the fish. So if the light's coming this way, wherever the light is sort of going to be hitting on this side of its back here, on the sort of raised part that's closest to the surface, I'm just going to kind of dot some of this sparkly stuff in. And it kind of helps with the illusion of there being lighting on the fish. And do little strokes too on some of the areas on the head where it sort of goes around. On the top of the eyes there. And then I did the same thing with my lily pads, but just with the center. So you can take a bit of the gold one, and I have these greens here. I have this sort of earthy green. The other one I think is too blue, so I'm just gonna stick with the earthy green and this gold. Let that get wet a little bit. So I normally do this part like after my pen work. You can finish the pen work first. You just don't want to get the pen too wet. These pens are supposed to be waterproof, and I find that they're not bad if you're not putting too much water, but I find they can bleed a little bit if you sort of disrupt them too much, even when they're dry. So again, I just dabbed in sort of to the center because that's where the shadow would happen. So now I'm putting it more in the shadow than the light, but that's only because my green metallic paint is actually darker than the rest. And it just kind of gives those imperfections that you find in nature. This is like, this whole step here, it's not obviously necessary, but I think if you manage, if you have some of this stuff and you manage to use it, I think you'll see the difference. It just kind of brings a lot of richness to the piece. It's kind of like those finishing touches that just make the piece kind of wow. If you're using the gold on this, it can kind of appear like leaf rust. And how much time do we have? Good, we've got a ton of time left, so I'm actually gonna go back now and finish these with you guys. Oh, another thing I did on these, just quickly, before I finish my pen work, on some of these center points, I've left them white, but that's because I wanted to take some of my watercolor here and just kind of make it look a little bit like the water had kind of spilled up onto that lily pad there, and maybe over here, just sort of like it's pooled a little bit in there. It doesn't have to be on all of them, just on a couple. And I did on these lily pads, so I didn't keep the frequency of the lines the same as you remember from here. It's more exaggerated on the side where the lily pad leaf breaks. I put way more of them, and I did less of them on the larger side. And that was just because I felt like if it was the exact same all the way across the leaf, it might look unnatural. So by adding that variation that you find in nature, it kind of helps to add to that sort of organic feeling. And then just up and around, following the curve, always following the curves. And there. How are you guys doing? You're good? Yeah. Okay. We're almost done this crazy thing. So I was on Etsy today and just looking around at different watercolor artists. And there were a couple people, one woman in particular, um, who started a shop in March 2020. And she's made 17,000 sales. And her lowest priced item is 34 bucks, which if you do the math is about $500,000 in a year. So there's definitely money to be made in watercolors. um, it's not that easy. I think partly what happens, like her stuff is good, Really nice, brightly colored. I'll put a link to her store for the next class because we're talking a little bit about this stuff next class, like the last one. Her stuff is good. It's brightly colored, which seems to be a trend at the moment, kind of like this style. Like I normally paint in a style that's sort of muted and really realistic, and then as soon as I started doing these ones, just the response was like way more intense. So I think partly that's helping, like her style is just in demand right now, but I think also in these cases it's partly just that this person knows how to set up an Etsy shop properly, because there's a lot of talent out there and there's a lot of really good artists that just don't get a lot of visibility. So I think it's just kind of a combination of a few factors. I found another guy too who does watercolors sort of in a similar style to hers, but obviously like a little bit different because it's his own style. He's been on Etsy for a lot longer, but I calculated in the time that he's been on Etsy, his shop has brought in around $800,000. So these people have made either $500,000 or close to $1 million selling watercolors. That's insane. I'm just like, I'm a bit floored at the kind of money there is out there for it. I sell pieces. I haven't made anywhere near that amount of money. But I do want to show you guys like different ways that you can set things up and different avenues you can think of if you're interested in trying to sell pieces. Because something that I have noticed is sort of the irony is that it would be really hard for me to sell this original. And if I did sell it, I might sell it for like, I could probably convince someone to pay like $50 or something, maybe 80 if it's framed and it's in a nice like little cafe, restaurant or whatever. This will never be in a gallery, obviously, unless it's like a really specialized one. So the irony is that I could probably sell this as a print for $30 to $50, but sell it multiple times. So you kind of start wondering why you bother selling your originals when you realize that you can sell a print for pretty much the same price. And that's sort of where I'm at with this crazy watercolor habit. So yeah, we'll discuss sort of like different ways of working and different avenues for stuff like that next class. I've also noticed like I'm on I've been checking on a lot of like licensing sites for licensing artwork because there's a lot of watercolor stuff on there. And I've purchased a few just to check out like what they're selling and how they're packaging it and stuff like that. And it's often like what we're doing here, I can tell you right now, in a lot of cases, is a lot more polished and professional looking. And I'm not saying that their stuff is bad. It's actually quite nice and it's doing the job for what it's designed for. But what I can tell you is that those artists do not spend a whole lot of time creating those pieces. And then they're able to sell them for, well, eternity. Like they can put it on there and then let it sit. And the sites are designed to bring clientele to see your stuff. And then you get a percentage on the sale each time you sell. So there's kind of interesting stuff going on out there for actually making some kind of living, or at least making enough to buy more art supplies, which is sort of my current case. All right, so that's pretty much what I did. Like if I look at my own piece right now and I want to be critical, I don't have enough going on in the tail, so I'm gonna go and just add a little bit more in here very carefully. I could either actually, I might even darken this water piece. I usually look at my pieces after. It's kind of good to let them sit for a couple days even. But I do like to look at them a few days later and just see if anything's not working for me with the piece. If anything needs like extra attention or more detail somewhere, a little bit of cleanup here or there. I find that this white part of my tail is a little bit boring at the moment, so I'm just adding a little bit more color on there. And I have this water coming on top, so I might actually do like a reverse sort of painting thing where I've just added a little bit more color on the tail on this side, but I might use the white silhouette on this part to just add a little bit more into that water that's coming across it. Darken that up a little bit. So now it's really just a process of like cleanup and figuring out if you need to add or adjust things. These fins are a little bit boring, so I'm going to come in here and just take some of my blue and kind of add a little bit of shadow on here. I might come in with some really small amount of blue and a whole lot of water on some of these edges here and just sort of clean them up. Again, you probably won't need to do this so much if you actually didn't rush through the painting like I did. So if you take a little bit more time at home, or you do another one and just take a little bit more time and are a little bit more careful, you won't have as much sort of cleanup to do. If I'm going to be printing these, I do sometimes do some cleanup in Photoshop, but I prefer to not have to do that because it is actually kind of a bit of a time waster. So it's better to just, and then your original is really nice and clean too. It's better to just try to get it right from the beginning. All right, I think I'm done. Oh my God, we're done. How are you guys doing? I'm gonna unmute you all if I can. There, ask to unmute. I don't know how it works. How you doing, Linda?
Fine.
Ah,
Yeah, but I'm not finished yet. But
that's okay. It's better if you take the time. It's looking great. Wow.
thank
That's
you.
awesome. That's so good. Good
Thank
job. That's, how are you doing, Rebecca?
I'll have to go back and do the flowers later, but
Yeah, that's fine. It's a big rush in an hour. Oh, that's looking awesome. Your one flower looks incredible there. Good job. And your fish is so nice.
thanks.
Yay. And Anne too. I don't know, Anne, your camera is green again. I bet it's just for me too. It's like fluorescent green. She'll email me later. She'll send it.
Yeah.
I do have a Facebook. I'm actually gonna link. It might actually be in my emails, but I'll link it to make sure. If you guys want to share it on your thing, it's a private group just for people in the class. And it's just for like if you want comments or just to be like, hey, look what I did or whatever. So it's there if anyone wants to post their work because I'd love to see it when you're done. And I'm totally here if you have questions or like you need comments or critique or whatever, then I can totally help you guys out with that. Question so far?
Yes,
Yes, what?
I would like to know, we can, but I know the answer is not gonna be no, but we can only paint watercolor on this kind of paper, or
Um,
can paint on fabrics or
you could on canvas. So I've tried it a bit on canvas and it works, but it doesn't absorb the same way. So it's just gonna, you might have to check what kind of fabric and then just see how it works. So you're probably gonna have to adapt your way of painting. But also keep in mind, if you ever get that wet, it's gonna wash off. So it's not like if you were to paint on clothing, for example, with acrylic or oil, where you could then wash it and wear it. If you do like a piece in watercolor on fabric, and it's not just gonna stay on the wall or something, if you wet it, it's gone.
oh,
you would probably have to, I think you can probably varnish it if you wanted it to stay, but then I don't think you could wash it still. Like it would just kind of fix it.
But the silk, you know, when you dancing with the veil.
Yeah, that's not watercolor. That's silk paint, and it's water-based, so it actually feels a lot like watercolor. And then that is a heat fixative. So there's two types. There's one that's an iron fix, and I have some of that, and it's really fun to work with. Actually, I can show you next week a veil that I did with it if you're interested, and I'll show you some of the little paints. I've never tried getting it wet, so I don't know if it is actually stuck, even though I ironed it. The other one that, like Mini Faye, we have a friend that does silk veils for dancing. Hers goes in a big machine that heat fixes it.
Okay.
So that one you can wash it and it's like no problem.
Okay.
So
And
you could paint on silk with watercolor and it would work. It's not going to absorb the same and it's not going to move the same. You could put it like on a piece of watercolor paper first to sort of use the sort of properties of the paper to get some of your bleeds. I did that a little bit and it seemed to work. But yeah, don't get it wet after because it'll just wash off.
And if I want to painting on a bigger paper, I gonna find it at Omar Dessert or?
Yeah, I have this one that I got from Memorial Dessert, and this is already like 11 by 17. But I have some, is it 11 by 17? 11 by 15, sorry. I also have some that I got from there a long time ago that's 18 by 24. And yeah, good, you have the same one, yeah.
But if I want bigger.
Bigger, you can go usually at the art store, they'll have like, sometimes they'll have rolls of paper. So it's like, and then you cut your own sheets, or you might be able to get them to cut it. But you can get really large pieces.
Okay.
Like huge, yeah. You'll probably have to size it though. So you'll have to put it on a board and like tape it down really well and get it all wet evenly and then let it dry. So it like flat, so it doesn't, because right now what's happening is this is like bubbling a little bit, but we can kind of flatten it because they're small. If you put it in a book, it'll flatten. But with the really big pieces, if you don't do that, it can kind of just like warp and not flatten well after. So the bigger the piece, the more important it is to size it. Does that make sense? Yeah. All right. Rebecca, any questions?
No, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
A
Guys.
beautiful project.
Yeah, I'm happy you liked
Yeah,
it.
Yeah.
You guys did great work. I'm so happy.
I have,
Sorry, go ahead.
okay, I have other question. If I continue painting and I have some question I can ask.
Yeah, just send me the image and I can, yeah, we'll discuss.
Okay. And the next class you're gonna tell us if we want to buy pieces, how to do it?
No, if you want to sell.
Sell.
So yeah, I'm just gonna sort of go through, because I started selling during the pandemic online, which is something I've never done. And I've just like discovered a whole bunch of stuff, and there's just like, I made a whole lot of errors that, because we're like, when you paint, there's always, to make something work and look good, there's like a composition. But as soon as you start changing the format, because if you like put it on products or whatever, or like people want different size canvases or shapes of canvases, you run into like all kinds of problems. So we're going to talk about sort of things that I did to sort of bypass those issues. And then, yeah, I'll go over like a few different, like, I'll show you a few different places where I like put my stuff on the products and things, just so you have like an idea. So it's just like a little bonus class of like extra fun stuff. That could be useful or could not be useful. It depends on what you want to do. But yeah, so that's what that's for. It's a bonus.
Okay, thank you.
I'll learn from my mistakes and don't make the same ones. Bonus, basically. All right, thank you so much, guys. And yeah, I would love to see your works when you're done, and feel free to like put them on the Facebook group, or if you're on audio.
You'll email the Facebook link.
Yeah, I'll email you the link. I think it's on the bottom of every email right now anyways, but I'll just make sure. that it's there. Yeah. Okay, have a great night.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.